having a holistic view on sustainability by our speaker, Dr. Suen. So with that, let me introduce Dr. Suen before he comes online to be able to share about this topic. So Dr. Suen, he founded Kindred Community in 2018, which is a non-profit organization that works towards fulfilling the vision of improving our environment and world we live in, with the belief of having clean thoughts, clean actions, and therefore a clean environment. Under Dr. Suen's leadership, Kindred Community took the lead as the Singapore representative for the World Clean Up Day in 2018, and it marked the first time our nation took part in a worldwide effort for the cleanup of our environment. Moving forward, Dr. Suen continuously seeks to deepen collaboration efforts with more partners and communities to catalyze greater change for our world. So without further ado, let me invite Dr. Suen to share with us on the next topic. Dr. Suen, please.
Hello everybody. Thank you for joining the call today, and apologies for the audio microphone a bit earlier. So today I'm going to talk about sustainability, and thank for the previous speaker that I think the last part of the presentation you talk about how broad sustainability is, and it is in fact actually really kind of complicated and really difficult topic at times, right? So I think with the earlier presentation there was a lot of focus on how we look at sustainability and ESG from a corporate point of view, and then now I want to also kind of broaden your perspective and look at it from different angles, right? Not just from point of view of corporate, but also from a more social, a more civic point of view, and also how the different aspects of sustainability as well. So when we think about sustainability, right, what does it speak to you, right? Is it talking about only climate change? Is it renewable energy? Is it about electric vehicles or carbon offsets, carbon credits? There are people who even link about vegans and food to sustainability, or is it about plastic ban, and the ocean, right? If you think, take a step back to think what exactly does sustainability actually mean, especially for you, right? So I would say that actually sustainability is many different things, right? So if we look at sustainability as defined by the United Nations, there are actually 17 different UN SDG goals, right? And if you look at it carefully, it includes even social elements like poverty, and also like hunger, health, equality and education, right? Moving on to even peace and justice, etc., etc. So it's not only just about energy and climate actions, or even things that we typically know about the environment, about life, on water and life on the land, and so on. And if we ask ourselves, why are there so many different sustainability goals? Right. So I'm not going to be able to cover everything today, but let's take a quick glimpse, right, at looking at sustainability at a more holistic kind of point of view. So when we look at sustainability, right, when we talk about ESG, we're looking at different aspects of both the social environment, the economic impact on the environment and on companies and people, and the environment itself. And one important thing, even if you forget everything, one important thing to take away today is always remember they're actually all very closely related. If I were to give some example, right, if we just look at greenhouse gas emission, right, you will see that energy itself is actually one of the biggest contributor for greenhouse gas emission. So for some people, that automatically means that, hey, then, we just need to solve this energy problem, then we are more or less done or finished, right, with the sustainability problem. But does that mean that that is the only way to solve the problem, or is that the only problem that needs to be solved? The other way to look at it as well, CO2 emission. The CO2 emission, even though it's something that's been talked about, by probably the wealthiest countries, nations in the world, but it's also, the emission is also the highest in the wealthiest country in the world, right? So the same people who are talking about sustainability are also the same people who are also emitting the most greenhouse gases, and carbon dioxide, right? So economics, something very closely related to sustainability as well. And this might be a more interesting diagram. I know it's a little bit small, but I'll just try to kind of map out, right? So the parts that you see in green is kind of related to climate and to agriculture when we look at, employment, finances, and how the production of food is affected, by the climate, when you have droughts, or when you have times of, excessive floodings and so on, it definitely affects food production. But the point is that it doesn't end there. If you go on to the next stage, right? Food supply, it's a little bit cut off, but it affects many other things, including the decreased sustainability in other areas. And also, it might also, make some dietary changes, right, to people as well. And if you go on the next step, right, if there is decreased food production, it also affects the social fabric, of the people, both the farmers, both the producers, and also the consumers. This could, when people have decreased economic means, this could lead to violence, suicide, anxieties, and all kinds of, social problems as well, right? So this is a very, maybe, and even this, I think, is a very, very simplified view of how we look at the entire problem of sustainability, which kind of brings us back to the point why when we look at sustainability, we kind of need to look at a lot of different problems almost simultaneously. Yeah. So, oops. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. So, and more about the environment, right? Even climate change, plastics, oceans, and even food, they're closely linked in many different ways, right? So without going into too much detail, on the left side, right, there are factories, they are agricultural, they are producing different kind of greenhouse gases, or things that's affecting the water supply, and things or waste that might be going to the ocean, right? This eventually leads to changes in the atmosphere. It also leads to changes in water temperature, in pH values, in the pollution of the water, affecting the aquatic ecosystem, affecting the oceans. And eventually, right, it has an effect back on the global climate change problem, but it also has an effect back onto food productions on land itself, right? So if you look at how life on land, life under the sea, our entire atmosphere, the air that we breathe, right? All of these things, and also the people, right? All of us who live, on this earth, all of these problems are really part of one huge, gigantic map that's interrelated and affects each other. Yeah. So, so really to understand, that full extent, at least about climate change, right? There's actually kind of a very good, interesting content. There's IPCC, which is one of the leading informations, or a team of global researchers which is researching all of the different aspects about climate change. Is broken into a few parts, including the science behind climate change, followed with the repercussions and the solutions. So even just, understanding what exactly climate change is, it's almost a 400 over page report, in the IPCC recommendations. So, you either have a lot of time to read through the entire reports. Otherwise, there's also a really kind of a fun event that's also taking place in Singapore called Climate Fest. I've been through it, a couple of times actually. It's really interesting if you are interested to really get a deeper understanding of how different aspects, from social, economic, our atmosphere, global warming, climate change, how it affects human life, how it affects life on land, and how it eventually, leads back to social problems and maybe even war, right, and other kind of violence as well. So really interesting workshop to consider as well. So coming back to the question, right? If we want to solve the problem of climate change, ESG or sustainability, do we need some kind of, really new technology or rocket science to solve the problem, right? And what a lot of people in this space is talking about is the concept of drawdown, which is not just talking about stopping climate change, but it's the point where we can reverse the climate change and starts to go on the path of recovery as well, right? But there's often, a big debate about do we need new technology or do we just need more change in people, right? So there are different camps of thought. Some people feel that if we have some wonderful, amazing technology, then that could really help solve that climate change issue, and it will help us, get closer to that drawdown point where we can start to reverse climate change. Whereas another school of thought is that no, actually, if people just change, right, everything will be solved, right? So some interesting content, from if you look at drawdown.org, it is a website that is actually talking about all the different kind of solutions in every single sector, right, that we can imagine in every single sector and domain, all the different possible solutions that we can do, not tomorrow, but today, in reversing climate change, right? So basically, in short, we have all the technology and all the solutions that we need to effectively stop and even reverse climate change, this very day. But what is missing is, I think, the strong collaborative efforts, that it is something that needs to be done, not just in a certain sector, but really throughout, all sectors, and looking at both government, private companies, and civil society as well as a collaborative effort. Yeah. So moving on to a little bit about sustainability issues in Singapore, there are of course many of them, right? Three of them that are kind of picked out, right? That I guess is probably quite in the foreground, of what is some of the big challenges Singapore face. One, of course, is because Singapore is really small. So the conservation of land, especially conservation of land space for natural biome, is really important. Energy is definitely a very important concern, and waste management as well, right? Among other issues, right? I mean, I think there's also food security, the topics that's really important for sustainability in Singapore. I'll zoom in a little bit more waste management, right? Just to get a feel, how big is that waste management problem? Singapore is not big, but in 2018 alone, we have produced approximately 7.7 million tons of waste, right? Enough to fill 15,000 Olympic swimming pools. If you look at what kind of waste is being generated among the household waste, 50% of it goes to food, 33% to packaging, right? Among this waste, right? And the others, to some other things. So the life cycle of that waste, right? In Singapore, for those who are not aware, waste almost basically all the waste in Singapore is incinerated. That's a reduction of volume, so that the eventual ash that's created is being sent to Semakau landfill and then filled there, underwater, so that the ash doesn't fly, because the ash itself is relatively toxic and not good for health, right? In the burning process, there's waste to energy conversions, but it's not really contributing a significant amount of energy as well, right? And basically, we do not have a lot of time before the Semakau Island, the Semakau landfill is being basically filled up, and we basically will not have any more capacity to incinerate, right? And the trend, I think what is most scary is that the trend of waste disposal has been increasing, right, by 700% over the past 40 years. So even the 2035, estimate is also slowly kind of getting nearer and nearer, because the amount of trash that's been generated by Singapore is also increasing over time. Yeah. So some people talk about recycling, right? I'll put a very bold statement that, at least in Singapore context, recycling is almost not a really sustainable solution, right? Probably not as much as we think, right? Firstly, because it is not an easy thing. In a Singapore context, recycling happens in this blue bin, it goes into a blue truck, but then most people do not hear about what happens after that. It actually goes into this MRF, material recovery facilities, where people are literally sorting the trash, or the recyclable materials into different categories. And also, if the content of the blue bin is being contaminated, then this entire process is basically kind of useless. If it becomes wet, if it becomes dirtied with food, and other kinds of, contamination, then basically all of the recyclable materials is also kind of not recyclable. But the even bigger problem is the economics around recycling, right? Specifically plastic. So if you look at plastic recycling, is currently a failed business. So the cost of recycled plastic, has been increasing to the point that recycled plastic is actually more expensive than new virgin plastic. So this also means that for any business that is producing, beverage bottles, other kinds of plastic products, it actually makes no economic sense for them to actually do recycling or to even push for recycling, right? So, which is why, kind of the bold statement. So does it mean that we are doomed to live with plastics, right? There are places where, the plastic trash is piling up, like a mountains. Microplastics are even found in human bodies, in the blood, right, for the first time. So, and it's found in basically literally every single ocean and seas around the world. So this is becoming something that, especially microplastics, becoming something that's literally found in the entire world from the North to the South Pole, right? And in human bodies as well. So are we really doomed, to live with this future, right? So when we talk about the solution, if we drop out recycling as a solution, I would think reduction, reusing and redesign is really important. And what that means is that when we talk about reduction, right, to reduce, the supply of plastic, right, it also means that we should actually consume lesser. It could be in terms of packaging, but it could also really, I think more fundamentally, right, it's also about consumerism. I think this is a really kind of a difficult topic, because if we think from the point of view of corporates and companies, who wants to make more profits, then in today's context, right, that benchmark, that the revenue they are generating every day, a lot of it is driven by consumption behaviors. So it's almost, for a supply chain, right, the more you consume, every single company along that chain is benefiting. I don't know, well, they may be generating revenue, they may be generating profits or not, but they're definitely generating more revenue, right? So as an end user, right, so turning the whole picture around, as an end user, our consumption choices has a very big impact, on how that reduction can happen, right? If we choose to consume more, or if we choose to consume sustainably, right, I think that's something that's really powerful. And from the point of view of reuse, right, so repurposing a product, right, whether it's upcycling, trying to take old products, and then breathe new life to it by either repairing it, changing it, using it, reselling it to other people, right? Or, as a maker community, repurposing an old product into something new and useful and then selling again, right? Thinking about how these kinds of business models could actually help to reduce and reuse, our use of plastics and also many other materials as well, right? But fundamentally, I think from the corporate point of view and for companies, especially product companies, redesigning your products, around how each product, can be at the end of its life cycle, could be actually designed to be reused, that the parts and components could be reused for other things, right? So I've seen also, even in the automobile industry, with millions of parts in a single automobile. There have been companies in this industry where they have designed the products, their cars, that every single part could be taken out. So the entire car could be stripped apart and every single part could be reused, right? Versus other companies, right, which have not thought about, how you can completely recycle, your entire product. And the right to repair, right, which is becoming an increasingly interesting or important topic, especially in the area of, IT gadgets, and so on. Because increasingly with the pressure, on having electronic gadgets that have a nice and beautiful design, we want to be prettier, faster, more powerful, slimmer, lighter, longer battery life, and all of these things. But those consumer pressure has also pushed, many of these companies to design products that are literally not meant to be, well, on the one side, almost completely impossible to even take apart without destroying it, right? And also extremely difficult, if not impossible, to repair, right? So even in the IT world, I think even with laptop designs, recently there have been more and more companies who are coming out with laptop designs where, small components, parts of, are designed to be replaceable, right? The CPUs could be swapped out so that you could technically have the same laptop, last a much longer time, where you are able to swap out critical components and keep it, upgraded, to your current workload over a much longer period of time. And also having that support infrastructure where you are able to get the necessary spare parts to repair and to fix your laptop, so that you're not forced into a trend of having to change your phones, your laptops, and other electronic gadgets that you own, right, constantly, in a fixed kind of a life cycle, right? So I do think that definitely everybody, right, as consumers, as part of this ecosystem, plays a very important part in making and to pushing for the right kind of consumption choices that we make. Yeah. And finally, as well, I myself actually running an NGO, I think like was introduced. So I do believe that, the bottom-up approach, right? So taking the approach, in terms of voluntarism, in actually pushing, and helping people to really understand about sustainability, and also about, the damage of, trash, and plastics to the entire environment, is very powerful when people actually go out, into the nature, to the beaches, and even actually in just the places around where we live, right? And we start to actually do cleanups, I've seen, over the many years that I've led many different kind of cleanup groups in many different areas, that I always see that people start to make a transformative change when they, with their own hands, go up and take action. That starts to actually make people start to rethink about a lot of things that they do, about their lives, about the choices that they make, about their own behavior in their daily lives, right? So I really encourage, if any of you are, CSR leads, companies, they are planning for some activities, so please do join us, right? We are helping many companies to actually take part in World Cleanup Day this year, starting from, I think there's a typo, 20th of August to the 18th of September this year. So it's a period of four weeks. So I really hope that, more people can join us in this movement. There are many different NGOs that are also taking part in this effort. So you could, scan this QR code or just search for World Cleanup Day in Singapore. And then, so I hope that this is, really kind of a short sharing, but I hope that this would help you to actually broaden the perspective, not just looking at sustainability from a corporate point of view, but also looking at, how so many elements of sustainability, including the social aspect, environmental aspect, economic aspect, and all the people involved, and how all of this are closely related. And very importantly, we have all the solutions, to make that change today, but it's always a question of how that can be implemented and how we can all collaborate across sectors and across the levels of society to make it happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suen, for your very insightful sharing. So now actually, we will actually go into a time of Q&A. Yeah. So actually, we do have quite a number of very interesting questions that came in, which I was taking a look at while we were having the talk earlier. So one question that we have is actually where there's someone who asks, do you think companies in Singapore are only jumping on sustainability because of the trend, not because they care about the environment? Any thoughts on this this question?
It's a challenging question, right? And it kind of depends on how you look at it, right? And even when you say companies in Singapore, I've dealt with many different companies doing CSR in Singapore, and there's a whole spectrum, right, of different companies. On the one side, public companies for sure, they do have a mandate to do CSR, even though today that is not really, there's no clear benchmark of how much you have to do, right? But they do have to do something, right? SMEs and private companies are slightly different. So I do think kind of like what the previous speaker mentioned, that the company leadership is very important, right? For them to be really sincere about doing CSR, I think it kind of have to come from the top. But even that itself is not sufficient, right? Even if the boss, even if the CEO does have a genuine interest in sustainability, it also takes a lot of connection with your employees, right? And also helping the employees to really understand about sustainability, all right? Many people look at it and many people have seen it on their social media, in the news. I think nowadays in the media, this is a really hot topic. Everyone is talking about it. But I have seen, that it doesn't mean that you have seen, 20, 30, 50 or 100 posts of social media that you automatically become a more sustainable person, right? I still kind of believe that that part where, individuals go out and actually do something, when they actually make a lifestyle change and when they actually kind of do a cleanup, or they take part in some kind of sustainable activities, that is typically the best chance for your employees to start to really internalize that change, right? I think when you receive information, it's just information, but helping your company and your employees to really internalize, that kind of sustainability mindset is equally important. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Suen, for sharing on that as well. Okay, so actually, we have time for one more question. Okay, so actually, there's a question that that just came in. So, May Win actually is trying to find out more about your opinion for companies to join, I guess, this movement. Is it important to have measurable outcomes? And what would be some measurable outcomes of, I guess, I presume sustainability efforts? How can they get them since the current circular ecosystem is not ready? What's your advice on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's a really good question, right? And I mentioned earlier in the beginning of my slides, right, that the first diagram that you saw, with energy taking out 75%, and many people easily jump to the conclusion, right? If you just change all light things to, electric, energy saving lights, solar, renewable energy, that we basically solve 3/4 of the problem. And I think it is easy to kind of see that direct, something that you can easily measure with some kind of a carbon credit or carbon offset, at the moment is probably the easiest and the most universal way to measure your sustainability outputs. But as I'm also trying to bring out, through my presentation, that if you look at a lot of indirect, causes of a lot of other things, right? Because I've often told people, picking up a piece of trash or picking up a plastic bottle on the beach, right? It has insignificant amount of carbon credits, that you are contributing, right, to the environment, to the ocean, and so on. But I think it has a lot of impact in terms of the secondary damage it does, to the ocean, to marine life, to life on the land as well, right? Which has repercussions to habitat. It has repercussions, to a lot of things that I don't think at this point in time we have a very good way to measure a lot of this, network effects of plastic on our ecosystem in general. And additionally, I think the whole act of doing cleanups also have a strong impact on the people themselves, on the volunteers themselves, right, who is doing it. Because the key point is that it is human beings who put the plastic in the ocean in the first place, right? It's not the problem about picking up the trash. The problem is really stopping the flow of plastic into the ocean in the first place. And that is also a human problem, right? And we can't really solve that until we all decide that we want to really do something about it, right? So I think there's a lot of secondary, social, environmental impacts that unfortunately, I think at this moment it's not as easy to measure as carbon offsets and energy savings. But I would think that they are very important as well, and they are equally meaningful today. In terms of circular ecosystem, well, yes, of course, I think at today's state, it's not really as ready as we hope it could be. But I think it also presents a lot of opportunities, right? Maybe not as much in big corporations, but we definitely see the trend that a lot of research, a lot of SMEs are trying to create, new kind of ecosystems when they are taking waste, or something that's considered waste from another industry and converting them into useful products, into a new kind of products, right? So as what one of my friend in the zero waste movement says, something is not waste until you really consider it as a waste, right? Somebody's waste could be somebody else's goal. So I think in this way, rather than thinking of it as someone has to create the circular economy, I think this is an opportunity for creative people to come up with new solutions where we start to think about nothing as a waste, but something goes into something. If we look at the way nature works, right, whether it's plants, leaves, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, and how animals, and plants coexist, in an infinite cycle, in an infinite loop, right? Nothing at all, zero goes to waste in nature, right? So I think we have to start thinking about supply chain as a circular thing rather as a linear kind of a process.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Dr. Shen. I think that's a very interesting, I guess, insight and analogy you shared with us as well. Yep. So I think also, especially in recent months, even in recent 1 year, 2 years, there's been a lot more talk and a lot more push towards sustainability efforts, whether it's in MNCs, SMEs, because I think it's becoming a lot more urgent as every day goes by as well. So I think that's actually a good thing also. Yeah. So we do have a lot of questions that actually came, which I've taken a look. Actually, all of them are pretty good, but due to time constraints, we will actually answer them after this festival also. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Shen, for your sharing, also for taking time to address the Q&A. So